far as my background, I've served on the Ontario City Council for 26 years. Ontario is located in Southern California, about 40 miles east of Los Angeles. In addition to serving on the City Council, as a result of my office, I've been appointed to the governing boards of just about every transportation agency in Southern California. I'm presently serving as the president of the Ontario International Airport. I'm also the past president of the Southern California Association of Governments, which is the metropolitan planning organization for Southern California, made up of 19 million people, 191 cities, and 6 counties. And they're in charge of doing regional planning for transportation, housing, and environmental and economic development. I also am the past president of the San Bernardino County Transportation Authority, past president of the Omnitrans Transit Agency that serves San Bernardino County. I serve on the Metrolink Commuter Rail Board. I serve on the Metro Gold Line Light Rail Board. So pretty much anything that moves in Southern California, I have my fingerprint on, with the exception of the ports themselves, although we do have to have the infrastructure in place to make sure that the cargo can go back and forth to the Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach. As I said, we've had some really, really good speakers, and I got to say, all the sessions were great, but I have to admit that for me and my friends on the West Coast, the 6 o'clock session in the morning, I apologize, and I have to admit I probably didn't catch the 6 o'clock sessions. But all the other sessions, I learned quite a bit. However, they were kind of scary to me because I'm not a technical person. You know, as an elected official, I identify the needs and I just tell everybody, fix it. And there's a lot of fix-it people out there that I really appreciate, and I certainly hope that the staffs at the various transportation agencies I serve on and at the city attend these kinds of conferences, because it's important that they stay on top of technology. They bring these recommendations to me, and normally, to be honest with you, I don't know enough about IT to ask questions. So when it comes budget time, they just get what they want because I trust them. Every other department gets very much scrutinized. So coming in a different perspective as a policymaker and as an elected official, I want to talk about the roles of a policymaker versus consultants, advisors, staff members. All of you that serve in that capacity have learned your particular field, you're experts in that field, and you make your recommendations based on your technical knowledge. And I truly appreciate that. But you have to understand that when these recommendations come to your governing board, or it could just be the board or the CEO of whatever company you work for, we take that as a factor when we make our decisions, but we also have to take the big picture into consideration, as well as the political sensitivity. And sometimes, for whatever reason, we don't follow staff advice. We recognize that it's nothing personal. They did a great job, but in looking at the big picture, we had to go in a different direction. And I just got to make sure that everybody works for governmental agencies, especially, don't ever take that personal. We appreciate and we don't ever doubt what you say technically, but we have to look at the bigger picture and other things in addition to that. Our job is to hire professionals that know how to do their job and stay out of their way. And if you have governing board members or city council or elected officials that aren't doing that, then they're not doing their job. Our role is to hire a professional to run the organization. At the city level, we hire a city manager. At each one of the transportation agencies that I sit on boards, we hire an executive director or a general manager. That is the one that reports directly to us. We have no authority to direct any other staff. And again, if you're being directed by governing board members, that's not correct. We hire one person, that person hires people to follow them. The job as a policymaker is to set a vision for the organization, to vote on policies that can be used to implement that vision, and then turn it over to our CEO, to our city manager, and hold them accountable for reaching the goals that we've set for them. And it's up to them to figure out how to get there. Certainly, if they need guidance or they need additional resources or financial support, we ask that they come back to us. I make sure that before we provide direction to anybody to do anything as far as our senior management, my last question to them is, has our direction been clear enough to you so that you can carry this out? The worst thing that we can do is assume that they know exactly what we want. They come back with the wrong product, and we haven't really accomplished anything. Our job as policymakers are to approve a budget. The budget should reflect the priorities of the organization. If it's a city, it's the priorities of the community. Public safety, usually number one. Infrastructure, whatever it may be, homelessness. The budget should reflect those priorities. And if there's something else that the city manager, the CEO, the executive director feels that they need to reach those priorities, and that's when we make the financial commitment to do that. It's also important that in addition to the things coming before the policy board, that we do acknowledge innovation. And I got to tell you, when I first heard about the position of an innovation officer, I said, yeah, right. That's the best job in the world because you're creating things that don't exist. So how do we know that you're creating what you're supposed to be creating? But the more I looked at it, I said, no, you know what? They really do serve a purpose. And I make sure that each of the organizations that I serve on does have an innovation officer or an office of innovation. And I expect these folks to not think out of the box, but to create a new box and just go forward. I want them to create things that don't exist to address concerns, issues that we need solutions to. And it's happening out there. You know, we have one example is that our airport, unfortunately, does not have rail serving it directly, but we know we need that rail connection. And we're going to talk about connectivity in just a little bit. And so we went out and we looked at technology that's available. And we found that technology similar to Elon Musk's Boring Company doing tunneling is extremely inexpensive, much less than land rail on at grade level. And we can then create a rail connection between the Ontario International Airport and a nearby Metrolink commuter rail system. So we're out actually in an RFP now looking for folks that have the expertise to develop that tunneling, and I'm sure Elon Musk will apply during that RFP process. So we are looking for new technology to use in ways that will address existing concerns, needs, or voids that we may have. We have to look at innovation and the impact to what we do. Certainly, I, as well as others, some are skeptics, recognize that autonomous vehicles will be coming sooner better than later. Certainly expect them to come in the public transit area and in the trucking areas first, because those are the most labor-intensive services that we have, and that's where the greatest cost savings will probably be realized. And then certainly we see autonomous vehicles. We've heard presentations on level 3, level 4 autonomous vehicles. Once autonomous vehicles are really running what they're supposed to be running, and I don't have a timetable, there's going to be very little need for parking lots any longer, because what we're going to have are cars consistently driving on demand, picking and delivering passengers off. So now I have to make sure that when one of the agencies I work for, and we're going through this at the city right now, wants to develop a parking structure because of existing need of vehicles, I said, well, make sure the technology is installed so that that parking structure can be reused potentially as an office building or whatever. So when you build a parking structure, you know, including the life safety types of technology that's necessary to convert it to an office building. And I think we really have to look at the impacts that are going to occur through the new technology coming through. It's pretty much similar to the Industrial Revolution and how we have to adapt. The goal of autonomous vehicles and autonomous society is not to lay off and put people out of work, but to find other jobs that they're qualified for and move technology forward. So these are all things that we have to make sure are being taken into consideration by our staff. I've asked our staff, because we're developing a network of electric charging stations. As you probably heard, our Governor Newsom has directed that all vehicles, there'll be no more fuel vehicles on the road after 2035, pretty aggressive timetable. In order to accomplish that, we need to improve our electric charging network. Well, I've gone out and I've looked at research in Israel, and I saw that inductive electric charging is being used in various places around the world. And it really is much more practical than establishing a charging station network. I'm sure you're all aware of inductive charging, where the charging is underground. It's consistently charging vehicles that have receivers attached to the bottom. Meters can be run in which you can charge it. You can use the same inductive charging cable to carry broadband internet service or whatever else you want to use. And the important thing again is that you have to have dedicated lanes just for electric vehicles. It would be really cost prohibitive to install inductive charging in every lane. But now that we're starting to run like electric buses, they could be consistently charging as they drive their fixed routes. So in this case, I'm kind of ahead of the game when it comes to the agencies I'm on, because I took the time to go out and look what's out there. Again, my direction, or the board's direction to our CEO, is develop, pursuant to state law, electric buses to go out there and run, and you figure out how to make it happen. I only make suggestions for some other new technology for them to look at. Now, this conference is about transportation security, which obviously is extremely important, no matter whether we're at the city, county, government level. One of the transportation boards I serve on, safety and security are always the number one factor, especially in transportation. And I think that the other modes, transportation certainly provides a huge economic development impact as well. Some of that economic development impact, and these are all things that as policymakers we have to take into consideration when we look at projects being brought forward. Certainly economic development has a huge impact on the movement, economic development of transportation on the movement of people. That could be via any mode of transportation, can be via air, commuter rail, light rail, buses, TNCs, whatever it may be. Obviously, movement of cargo is extremely important, especially here in Southern California, where we have the largest ports in the country, serving the entire country out of Southern California. We have to make sure that the proper infrastructure is in place and that we're able to mitigate the impacts that that amount of diesel trucks and trains impact on the people and the communities in Southern California. So it's important that we always recognize that. And then we also see a positive impact of transportation and actually creating an economy. In our local area, we've created a huge e-commerce industry, which obviously has been assisted during the pandemic, where brick and mortar has been closed and people have turned to e-commerce. With the proximity to the airport and 3 interstate highways and 2 rails, we are one of the prime locations in Southern California for e-commerce. We also have the hubs of UPS, FedEx, and Amazon Prime at our airport. So while passenger counts are extremely down, we're seeing an increase in the use of cargo. Transportation is what makes it happen. But we also see what happens when there's an interruption to any transportation mode. Aviation has really hurt the economies worldwide. Not like 9/11, where the entire aviation system was shut down and then reopened a few days later. This has been a much longer process, and it's going to take a much longer time to bring it back. We have airplanes and air crews on furlough, on layoffs, planes being parked all over the country. It's going to take a long time before the demand reaches the point where we're able to continue as was. And I'm hearing it could be as far as late on 2021, especially when it comes to international air travel. So what impact should that have? Well, that's tremendous impact. Certainly in our communities, any venue that houses a large amount of people, we have an arena in our city. So that means no professional sports. That means no concerts, family entertainment. We've laid off every single person but one at our arena. So it means loss of jobs. We're starting to see professional sports again, but no audiences, therefore no revenue really on site. Same thing with convention centers. Just like this, we would have normally been in Miami at a convention center. People are now virtually going to conferences, going to meetings. So our convention centers essentially closed as well. They're not hosting anything. And it's a lot of it is due to the airport. So even when the airport opens, if flights are curtailed, then conventions aren't booked here because people have no way of getting to the convention center, to the city to visit these different venues. And certainly when airport traffic is up, so is the economy locally. And that is hurting the local economy. So the importance of transportation, I see transportation as the heart of the economy. I think everything is linked to transportation. whether it's housing, jobs, creation of new employment, transportation, or lack of is what makes it happen or not happen. I'm in the unique position of serving on all these transportation boards, so I'm probably the one best positioned to recognize connectivity or lack of connectivity between modes of travel. And when I talk about that, I don't just talk about operational, meaning that it's really important that you can take a bus and get the train that you need on the right time, or you can land an airplane and make sure you get to the train that you need to get where you're going, or to the bus. Because certainly in Southern California, we do not have the connectivity that we need. There should be a bus waiting when trains get there. There should be trains waiting when the planes get there. And we're not seeing that in Southern California, nor do I think we see it enough anywhere else. We also don't see the operational connectivity as far as having universal fare systems, making it easy for transit riders. It's important that people understand that we can't build our way out of the congestion that we have. We have to really convert as many people as possible into transit. That's important because we have to understand how transportation infrastructure is financed. Traditionally, infrastructure for vehicles has always been financed via gas taxes, whether they state or federal excise tax. The problem is that those taxes have remained where they are for many years while the cost of infrastructure has gone up. The other problem, if you want to call it a problem, is that many more vehicles are running on electricity alternative fuel, which means that we have just as many, if not more, vehicles mile travel, which means the wear and tear on the roads occurring, but less money coming in because if they're not buying gasoline, they're not generating the excise taxes. So we had to figure out a way to get out of this. My solution, and the solution that many of my colleagues agree with, is a vehicle mile charged fee where you don't pay excise taxes at the gas pump anymore. It's not in addition to, it's instead of. But all vehicles, no matter what type of fuel they're using, will pay per mile that they drive. And actually, studies show that it will help people save money instead of paying more money through the existing system. It's just so much more sustaining. It sustains itself because the more you drive, the more impact you have. You're going to also be able to recognize, it's like having a meter running. You're going to see how much money it's costing you to drive your car. I kind of found out about this when I first got on the transit board, and I found out that transit is about 80% publicly subsidized. So essentially, if you pay $1 for a ride, you're paying $1, but the two rides costing about $10 or $9. And I was astonished. But then I did more research and I found out how much private transportation is being subsidized. Private transportation is being subsidized over 100%. If you ask a normal person, how much does it cost for you to maintain your car and drive it, they usually say about 50 cents a mile because that's what the IRS allows. Well, that might cover the cost of gas and wear and tear and repair of your vehicle. But when you add up all of the cost that the impacts of private transportation have to governmental agencies, the price of driving your car is probably well over $10 a mile. The impacts to health, having to pay for the problems with asthma and other breathing problems because of the environmental impact, traffic collisions, the impact of emergency rooms, the impact of public safety having to be deployed for traffic control and taking reports of traffic collisions, just the development of the infrastructure itself, it really adds up. And so the real answer is, since we can't build our way out of this, we've run out of capacity. They talked about double-decking freeways. That's not going to happen. Is we've got to find some way to get people into transit and alternative modes of transportation. Here in Southern California, I'm sure throughout the country, conservatives say you're trying to steal our vehicles, get us out of our vehicles. You're doing road diets. You're trying to make room on the roads for bicycles and scooters and electric cars. And my response to that is no, keep your car as long as you want. We're just offering options to you. And it's important that these options be readily available. So what we found as far as getting people into transit, we found that transit has got to be reliable, number one. That if you have a job, you can't take a chance on your train or your bus being late getting there. It has to be efficient, has to be economical, has to be more economical for you to take public transit than to drive your own vehicle. The other thing that's really important, though, and we've already discussed this a little bit, is that it has to be secure and safe. That's number one. Any community public safety is number one in any mode of travel. I serve on the Metrolink commuter rail, and unfortunately, we've had some very tragic catastrophes where we've had dozens of people killed in train crashes. So what we've done is reacted to that, implemented what's called positive PTC. It's technology, it's out there. We were the first in the country as a commuter rail system to implement it, and it has prevented a lot of crashes with trains. There's technology available like that for all modes of travel. And it's interesting. It's interesting to look, and we've heard about this for the past 2 days about all the technology for safety and security that's out there. And I haven't heard about 90% of it. And that's where the void is. Unless that message gets through to the policymakers that are making the decisions, budgetary and policy wise, it doesn't make any difference. Security plays a huge role, and it could be positive or it can be negative, and perception is so much more relevant than actual. And this, we could have the safest community in the world, no crime at all, but people watch the media and they see all the violence going on in the media, and they just assume it's that way in every city. Transportation's the same thing. You can have an unfortunate incident in any community in the country, and all of a sudden transportation is not safe. The pandemic's doing it right now. Obviously, ridership in public transportation was down to about 10% of normal levels. We're getting to 30% now in air travel. Many airports are still at 10% of what they were. Ontario Airport's one of the fastest growing. We're at about 30, close to 40% of where we were. But that's because people don't feel safe using these public safety modes. These public transportation modes. And so we have to find a way to respond to that. And I think we've heard about some potential solutions through this conference. Perception works the other way too. The simplest perception of a positive and a safe environment, and this has been used, is you park an empty police car in front of a public venue, whether it be an airport or another public venue, an empty police car next to a freeway that has a slowing effect on traffic. It gives you the perception that there's police officers on site, so you're going to go someplace there aren't police officers. Certainly the more sophisticated terrorists or whatever are going to, obviously do more surveillance. But that's a perception, that's a positive one, and that people feel safe. Unfortunately, we see that in aviation. I think if you asked anybody what mode of transportation is the safest, they'll say aviation. We go through more safety precautions to get on an airplane than you get on a bus, on a train, anywhere else. And we certainly saw the immediate reaction to 9/11. None of us were prepared for a domestic or an international attack here in our homeland, just like none of us were prepared for a pandemic that we're facing. And so there was an immediate reaction to 9/11. Their reaction shut down aviation completely, which is obviously was the right thing because we didn't know what was going to happen next. And then as we reopened aviation, they created an entire department of Homeland Security and Transportation Safety Administration. You saw this being deployed in airports all over the country with all the rules and regulations. And now we even have TSA and DHS involved in all modes of transportation. You'll see TSA at train stations, at transit stations. But what's interesting, now that I get an inside view as being involved in aviation, and you probably observe this as a layperson as well, is that there is a perception of safety and security in airports, right? So you get to TSA and you're given a long list of what you shouldn't be carrying. You can't carry a little knife. You can't carry aerosol. You can't carry more than 3 ounces of liquid. You can't carry any of this stuff. And you're searched and you're x-rayed and everything else. And you say, wow, this is really safe. You know what? I feel comfortable here. But if you really look at it, and this is something I brought to TSA, and I know that they have a lot of techniques that they use when it comes to profiling and surveillance and everything else. But let me ask you this. You're in an airport, you've already cleared sterile, they've taken away whatever it is, your makeup or your aftershave lotion, and you're in one of the restaurants and you say, you know what, you want to kill somebody on a plane. You want to take over a plane. So you see a busboy make a minimum wage or prevailing wage at our airport, and you say, "Hey, here's $50, $100. Could you just get me a steak knife? I need a steak knife to take care of some stuff." There are no inspections prior to getting on the plane. When they first reopened aviation, there were random inspections at the gate, and that's really what we need. Don't know why we're not doing it. Don't know if it's because they can't afford the additional staffing. But even if people knew there was a chance they were going to be searched prior to getting on the plane, that would at least potentially deter anybody from doing what I'm talking about. By the way, the police officers do actually do inventories on knives at the restaurants every day, but it's only like once a day. So certainly that potential is there. So we have to be really careful because people perceive that things are safe there. And I don't want to change that because I don't want people to be scared about aviation. But if you want the best model, any of you that have ever flown El Al Airlines know that they've never had any kind of incident in the air, no hijackings, nothing like that. If you fly El Al, they do a background check on every one of the passengers. They get your names, your date of birth. They know everything about you before you get to the airport. When you get to the airport, before getting your ticket and your boarding pass, they interview each and every passenger. Why are you going to Israel? What is your business there? They do all of that. Once you get to the gate, you're searched again. And by the way, they check your boarding pass. As it is now, they check your boarding pass at TSA, but we have no idea who's on these airplanes because you just hand them a boarding pass, you don't show ID, and we have airplanes with who knows who's on those airplanes. We should be doing boarding pass checks at the gate. LL does. And they go one step further. They go on the plane and they verify that every person is in the seat assigned to them, and they have Israeli military officers walking the aisles of the airplane with the Uzis that are manufactured in Israel. There you feel safe. And by the way, you really are safe. So I think that in aviation, as well as other modes, we have to start looking at more advanced technology other than just the searches and those kinds of things right at the port of entry. And finally, I want to go back to connectivity. Security and safety has to be connected as well. We need to make sure that the security staff at the different modes of transportation are receiving the same type of training. They're using the same type of technology. And really, it doesn't make sense to have the silo effect where each mode of transportation operates on its own without connecting to anything else, because that will make it very difficult to attract folks to use the various modes of transportation. And once again, we have to make sure that safety is our primary concern. So what can we do from here forward? We have to make sure that all of our experts that we've heard from don't stay in silos, that they share their information with different folks working on different types of technology so they can work together and present a package to governmental agencies or anybody that needs their services. And we have to make sure different levels of government communicate. The biggest lesson I learned through this pandemic is that people have no idea what's going on. They're confused. They're receiving one message from the president, one message from their governor, one message from the county supervisors, a different message from the mayors. And I feel really bad for businesses and people in the community because they're confused. There's been absolutely no open lines of communication between the various levels of government. It's the same problem when it comes to safety and security. There has to be continual lines of communication involved. I'm a retired police officer. I could tell you that when I was working, there was zero communication between us and federal officers. There was animosity and never working together. After 9/11, the government demanded that all government agencies share information. They've established places where police officers from municipalities can clear security check, and they can then work with federal agencies in order to determine what's best for the safety and security of all residents.